there's a paradigm shift that needs to be, you need to be aware of what's happening. And this is why we need to break up our content and make it into little bite-sized pieces. And that is, in the old model of church, you had, captive audiences in a building in front of you on Sundays. That's no longer the case. And in the old model, you had assumed interest in what you have to say. Mm-hmm. People would sit there and consume the whole thing because they wanted to hear that. Salvation was on everyone's minds as the number one thing that they need to figure out in life. That's no longer true. Instead of assumed interest, you must demonstrate relevance today. You must show them why you matter, why this content matters, why this message matters to them. So this paradigm shift of assumed interest to demonstrating relevance is part of the reason why social media is a necessary communications strategy in the entire content framework today.
Well, thanks for tuning in today to the Missional Marketing Podcast. My name is Bart Blair. I'm joined by the CEO of Missional Marketing, Jason Hamrock. I'm in Texas. He's in Arizona. We're a couple of time zones apart from each other. We don't know what time zone you're in, but we appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch this podcast. Our goal is to help your church grow by leveraging digital marketing and effective communications. And what we've done today, what we do pretty much every episode, is we interview someone who can actually help you in these areas, someone who can help you with your digital marketing and your communications. And today's guest is, I'm just going to go on a limb and say this guy is one of the best at this stuff. Jason, you want to introduce our guest?
He really is. If you haven't heard of him, you're going to want to get to know Kenny Jahng. He is an amazing guy. He's a good friend of ours, good friend of Missional Marketing's, good friend of mine. Kenny he does everything. It seems like this guy, talk to this guy, you almost get a little depressed going, I feel like I need to be doing more because he has his hands into everything. Some of you might know churchcommunications.com. They also have Church Communications Facebook group. He was the co-founder with Katie with that. They've got 30,000 people who are a part of the Facebook group, Church Communications. He also does a tons of other things. He's a StoryBrand certified guide. He's editor-in-chief of churchtechtoday.com. You should go check that out, churchtechtoday.com. He's amazing. Today, we're actually going to talk a little bit about ways that you can use your sermons. And so we unpack some really practical ways that you can take the sermons after they've been preached and what you can do with them, how you can really leverage your sermons to go a lot further than we are currently doing. So Kenny, he's amazing. I'm excited for you to hear from him.
Yeah, this is a fantastic interview. He's got some really great points on how to repurpose your sermon content to really just give it more life and more reach. And we hope that you find these tips and Kenny's coaching to be super useful today. If you find our podcast to be useful and you're appreciating what we're producing here, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave us a rating, leave us a review. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, wherever you consume it, be it YouTube or your favorite podcasting app, please make sure that you do that. So that way you don't miss any episodes. We've got some great stuff on the horizon for you, and we don't want you to miss a thing. So here's our recent interview with Kenny Jahng. Kenny Jahng, welcome to the Missional Marketing Podcast. Jason and I are excited to have you on the show today.
Hey, good to be with you guys.
Yeah.
Hey, we've had to juggle schedule around a little bit to make this happen. I'm glad that it is finally happening. And this is your second time on our podcast. First time with me. I was not actually part of the podcast the first time that Jason interviewed you. So I consider it a privilege to get a chance to connect with you today. We were talking just a few minutes ago before we started recording that I was an early adopter to this really cool platform years and years ago called Church Butler. Church Butler. Do you remember that?
Oh, Church Butler still exists. There's
I know. I Googled
number
just to
of churches
see.
Still on the platform. But yes, that was one of the first journeys out there to help churches in mass to get a hold of we used to say empathy is the point where you understand that the local church communicator feels like they are on the treadmill of death, feeding the content machine 24/7, right? There's this incessant pressure. Even when you're going to sleep, you feel like, oh, should I be tweeting something right now? And Church Butler was a solution to try to help alleviate that malady for the church communicator.
Okay. All right. This podcast is not going to be about Church Butler, but we do want to pick your brain on a lot of different things. Before we get into that, for our listeners or our guests who might, for some strange reason, not have any context of who you are and what you're all about, aside from Church Butler, why don't you talk a little bit about your ministry journey and the things that you've been doing, I don't know, for the last couple of weeks? I don't know if we can go any further back than that because you got so many things going on.
I think the best way, someone recently said to me that you are basically a ministry entrepreneur. And I think that's true. Got my hands in a lot of things, depending on what day of the week, what cap I wear. So a good way to, I think, understand my journeys. Part of my time was spent in a multi-site ministry or two, working as an innovation pastor, church online pastor. That's where I really started to understand the dynamics of what digital ministry is. I really began to understand that the Holy Spirit works in pixels and that there's so much more out there for churches. Another part of the journey is I co-lead a community called Church Communications. We have over 30,000 communicators, part of the family in a Facebook group and a lot of other places that we convene them. And the third hat is that I run a digital agencies, helping nonprofits, Christian ministries, denominations with what I call the Art of Engagement framework. It's a content marketing framework to propel digital engagement online, which is what everyone wants. And then the latest little side gig or fun thing that I'm doing is I've turned into the editor-in-chief of Church Tech Today. It's an online resource, hopefully, again, trying to shed a light on how we use church and technology together to empower all your leaders out there that are trying to just reach more people for the gospel online.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, yeah. So you got to go check that out. Kenny's in a lot of different things and moving and shaking. So thanks for all your brains putting into the ministry, into the Big C Church. It's making a difference. So, hey, today I want to talk about sermons in particular. Yeah. And I'm excited about this conversation because when you think about every week, a pastor gets up on stage and preaches, and there's a lot of preparation that goes into delivering that message. And no doubt the Holy Spirit speaks through him and he's delivering that. What I think we don't do is we don't think about so much after the fact.
Yes.
And so let's get into this because you wrote down 5 things you should do every week with your sermons. I'm excited about this. We preach this stuff all the time, but I want to hear it from you. So talk to us about the 5 things that every church should do with their sermons.
Yeah, the takeaway, I think, for today's episode and conversation is if you can embrace this idea that we need to look at content and publish content with purpose. And part of that is the secret sauce there is repurposing things, right? Repurposing is your friend. And so there's many ways to do it. I love some of the things that we've discussed over the years. One of the first things I think that most churches don't even think about is transcribing the sermon. Even if you have a manuscript that you work off of, you need to transcribe it. And there are tools like rev.com. There's tons of tools out there online that do it easily in an instant for you. And once you have a transcript, then there's so many things you can do with it. You can actually create multiple blog posts. You can create one long blog post, and then you can have tangential ones based on individual points that you have in the sermon. You can highlight different portions of your transcript and create social media assets out of them. So there's tons of things that you can do once you have the text in a form that's digital that you can use and manipulate and repurpose. Transcribing is something that every church should consider first with their sermon, in my mind.
Yeah, and I also look at when you've got resource. So I think a lot of communication directors or anybody who's listening to this podcast goes, "Are you kidding me? I'm on to the next thing." Right, you are. But if you actually stop and build a team of volunteers, you probably have people in your congregation who have time on their hands who might be decent editors, writers. They have the content. Maybe you could deploy them to take that and give them some direction to allow them to do what you just said.
Absolutely.
Okay. Guys, I'm going to stop you for a second. Come on. I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. I've already preached the sermon. It's recorded on YouTube. It's posted on my YouTube channel. It's also on my Subsplash page. Why in the world do I need a transcript? Why in the world do I need blog posts? Like, what's the benefit of that?
Well, I think it's the idea of who are you preaching to? Are you preaching just to the people that are in your pews right in front of you on that specific day and time? Or has God given you a message so that you are herald with that message to people beyond that time and space? And once you have the content in the transcript, then you're able to use it on your website. You're able to attract people. We're taking advantage of Google. We're taking advantage of all the social networks. You're using people to bring what we call in the business top of the funnel, right? Meaning people that are in that awareness stage, you're catching them with felt needs of topics that they're searching for. You want to bring them into your ecosystem.
And Google can't crawl a video, right? So you keep that video on your website, but they're not going to crawl that from an SEO purpose.
Yeah.
So you have to have content that Google can crawl on your website.
Yeah. I would even say what we're doing for some videos is we're taking transcripts and putting chunks of it into the YouTube descriptions, like you were talking about, Bart. Like even if you're going to put it on YouTube, put the stuff in the actual description so that it's searchable and you can help users discover your content easier.
Okay. So transcribing is obviously one of them. Very, very important to transcribe it. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, the next one is we need to repurpose it. We need to figure out other ways to actually syndicate it. So you obviously are thinking, hey, can we live stream this, whether it's live or simulated live? Can you publish it on your website, your home base? Like we talk about all the time. You should not be like relying on rented spaces out there. So you need to build up your home base, your owned property, and that's your own website. Again, Bart was talking about YouTube, creating playlists. That's the perfect thing to do with video content. And then social media clips. We have to slice and dice it today because we live in Netflix nation in the YouTube world, and people don't consume 20, 30, 40-minute sermon videos all at once. They want short snippets, and these snippets can be syndicated out as reels, as stories, as YouTube shorts. It goes on and on and on. Basically, you're doing the work once, and then you're taking that investment and multiplying it.
Love that.
What would you say? What would you say if you could just really boil it down to something really simple? What's the benefit of me repurposing these sermon clips and posting them to Instagram, to Facebook, to the social media channels? Like who's going to watch them, and what's the end game here? What am I really trying to accomplish?
That's a very, very good point there. So again, this is the part where some people lose sight of the strategic intent of content marketing. Content marketing is not just to get the plays and the likes and the vanity stuff. You're not just, and I just posted this somewhere, stop trying to convert with content, start creating conversations with content. And the whole purpose is to get them interested in who you are. You want to establish your authority. And really, these short clips, these excerpts, these little pieces that you're putting out there is demonstrating relevance of your message to what they're experiencing right now, whether it's a life stage, a crisis, some felt need that they have in their life. You're using those clips to demonstrate relevance for what you have to offer to go deeper in the relationship with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I say it like this, that, Bart has heard this, and people listen to podcasts have heard me say this, that, the first stage is you're trying to build awareness. Yeah. People that you exist, right? And when people understand and they recognize you, they're like, oh, that's a church. Now the next stage, they're engaging with some of your content, yes. Right? And at that point, it's up to them if they're going to take that next step they're going to make a decision to continue that engagement, right? But if you don't even have anything for them to engage, nothing's happening, and you're losing. And so you've got to take those necessary steps of what you're saying to transcribe it, to repurpose it, to get it out there so awareness can happen and engagement can happen so that a decision can be made. Maybe they're going to attend in person, or they're just going to watch from a distance online. Absolutely. Hey, it's all part of your discipleship strategy.
There's this one big there's a paradigm shift that needs to be, you need to be aware of what's happening. And this is why we need to break up our content and make it into little bite-sized pieces. And that is, in the old model of church, you had, captive audiences in a building in front of you on Sundays. That's no longer the case. And in the old model, you had assumed interest in what you have to say.
Mhm.
People would sit there and consume the whole thing because they wanted to hear that. Salvation was on everyone's minds as the number one thing that they need to figure out in life. That's no longer true. Instead of assumed interest, you must demonstrate relevance today. You must show them why you matter, why this content matters, why this message matters to them. So this paradigm shift of assumed interest to demonstrating relevance is part of the reason why social media is a necessary communications strategy in the entire content framework today.
Yeah.
That's gold. I really appreciate that. I haven't heard anybody really shape that way before. I want to share something with you guys that I shared with our team of coaches yesterday as it relates to social media and really what we're trying to help churches accomplish with social media. You know, I grew up in Texas. I live in Texas. I grew up in an old town with everybody on the street had like these big front porches. And in the summer, even in the fall and the winter, you could sit out on the front porch and you'd see people and you talk to people as they're, walking their dog or riding their bike. And what I shared was that like social media is kind of like being on your front porch and flagging people down as they walk through the neighborhood, right? They're out, they're doing what they're doing, and you're going to interrupt them by trying to get their attention and start a conversation and try to get them interested and engaged. But the goal is not to leave them standing on the sidewalk. The goal is to try to get them into your living room so that they can get to know you a little bit better and engage with you on a more intimate level, and then ultimately move them to the dining table where we can actually share a meal. And I say social media is kind of like the front porch. Your website is like the living room where they can kind of get to know you a little bit better, what you're all about. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is get them into that incarnational worship experience where they're sitting down at the meal with us together. And so I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying there, Kenny, about using social media to demonstrate the relevance so that you can get their attention enough that they'll want to take those next steps to get to know you better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about transcribing it. We've talked about repurposing it. Third step.
Well, the tool that I love and everyone still needs to understand is that email is still the killer app. Email is the place you're going to get the most impact and conversion and engagement. You need to build your list. In the business side, you hear the terms that the money is in the list. And the reason why is because it still works. So using your sermons to create a mini email sequence that's automated where you might have a sermon series on a specific topic, and that you create one email per sermon message, and that someone can sign up to be able to consume that on a drip by drip basis is one of the best things that you can do. Because one, it introduces them to something that's self-selected in terms of topic and gives them continuity. Two, you're showing up in their inbox on a regular basis, so you have multiple impressions. Third, you've captured their information and you have permission to continue the conversation. And so it's just a win-win for everybody, taking your sermons and increasing the shelf life for people that really want to know about that specific topic and message in particular.
I just had a call at the church the other day. We were talking just this. This was it. This was the discussion they were talking about, and it was, you could sense overwhelm. Like, where do I begin? We could talk about this and this and this. I'm like, take a break. Just start. It's not going to be perfect, but figure something out. Think about what you're going to offer. What's that call to action? What's that content to generate an email? And then what's those sequence of emails after the fact? Once you build it, you let it go. And every day it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? And you're going to get it better. You're going to fine tune it. And once you've got a system put in place on one topic, now you can duplicate it, right? And start running. It's that flywheel, right? We were talking about, the merry-go-round, right? Everybody remembers and you get out, you start pushing the merry-go-round, and it's hard at first, but once it starts going, step back because it's going to fly. But you have to start somewhere and don't be overwhelmed with where you start, right? So, what would you recommend in terms of if people go, how do I even begin that?
Well, first, there's a great book called Turning the Flywheel by Jim Collins that everyone should. It's a short book, but it talks about the flywheel concept pretty well. But yeah, I think in our world, we don't think about systems and processes enough. And that once you're able to create something like that, as you mentioned, that over time, the more things that you do, you have incremental gains, exponential returns. It's not a one-to-one thing. And I think people get addicted pretty quickly to using content marketing in the way that you're describing.
I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in to the Missional Marketing Podcast. It's always our goal to help you as a church leader leverage your communications and digital media resources to reach more people for Jesus. One of the ways that we help churches do that is through creating social media content from your Sunday sermon videos. Specifically, what we can do for you is to create short sermon snippets from 30 seconds long to 5 minutes long, capturing those mic drop moments that you really want people to remember. We edit the videos, add captions, add your church branding, and then you or we post them to your social media channels. As a pastor, I always love to see my sermon content live on beyond the Sundays, and I know that's what you value for your sermons too. We offer this service as a monthly subscription, but we've got a 6-week trial that gives you a chance to see how it works. If you'd like more information, just shoot me an email at vblair@missionalmarketing.com. I'd be glad to meet with you, explain the process, and answer any questions that you have. Once again, thanks for tuning into our podcast. Let's get back to the interview.
It's beautiful. Okay, so
Kenny, wait, I have one more question on that topic before we move on to the next one.
Let's nerd out.
Yeah. So because I'm in agreement with you that email is a really, really important tool that we can use. And when we're sending out these email sequences, kind of nurture campaigns, try to nurture a relationship, what kind of calls to action would you include in those types of email campaigns? Is it just, hey, click and watch the whole sermon? Or are there other things that you would try to do to engage the person at some other level in those email sequences?
Oh, absolutely. So that's a very, very good question. So remember I said, stop trying to just convert with your content. You want to start creating conversations. So one of the best ways to do things is to have open-ended questions, to offer some sort of metaphor, analogy, or some personal story, and then asking what your version of that is. Did you experience something like this? Hit reply and let me know. You want to have excuses for people to reply and treat it as if it's a one-to-one email. This is the best issue that you can actually create and cause. One of the things that we did in one of the churches I worked in, we took the general newsletter that went out weekly, and we changed the from address from, instead of info at, we put the name of the person that was the campus connections coordinator. So we had multiple campuses. We split up the email list. Instead of sending out one blast to the entire church, every campus had their own list. It came from the campus coordinator and that person's email address. And then we always ended it with some sort of personal thing about the campus coordinator. Within 3 weeks, there was a complaint from one of the campus coordinators that said, I can't take this anymore. I have too many people asking questions and wanting to talk to me. We have to turn it off. Can you imagine just sitting in that room? And you can feel the pain of the staff member. If you've ever worked on staff, you understand that feeling. But at the same time, the tension is, that's what we're here for. I'm as a marketer, my job is to create that specific problem. Too many people from your campus want to actually engage and actually have conversations during the week and not just on Sundays. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, boys.
That is a great problem to have. So then you can come up with the strategies about how you open-ended.
You want open-ended calls to action. Church Online, when we were hosting Church Online, there was another pastor, Richard, and what we would do is he was a campus pastor, and he would offer up a keyword orange. And it said, if you see me on Sunday and just tell me the keyword this week, I'll buy you a cup of coffee, or I'll do something, or he would actually have these things. And guess what? People would seek out staff members and then say the code word and then strike up conversations, right? We want to drive engagement through relationships, not sign up for this, donate to this, share this. Those are great calls to action, but think relationally. What are the other things that we want people to do?
If you're having a conversation with somebody about, a lot of egg hunts have been happening, right? This week, it's Easter week, by the way. So egg hunts have been happening. and you invited a neighbor and they win or they're there, you wouldn't say, hey, have you been baptized yet? Like that just isn't a natural next question. The next question might be, hey, you guys, are you free? We have VBS coming up. You guys, the kids could all go to that, right? That's the next logical relationship type of thing. So do that in your emails and in your communications. Don't let it be, have you been saved? Like, come on, that's such a far leap. That is, yes, we want that, but those are steps. And that might be step 20 in this relationship. And I think sometimes churches want to take that leap over there. It's like, don't do that. You're going to ruin the relationship if you do that.
Patience, grasshopper, patience.
I love it. Okay. So we talked about those three, right? So let's go on to the fourth one, which is what?
Well, I say we bundle and offer it. So usually you have a sermon or a sermon series, and there's so much that hasn't been exposed on Sunday. And those are still valuable resources for the layperson typically. So why not bundle it up, package it up very easily so that someone who wants to dive into that topic even further and explore it further, if you're doing your discipleship properly at your church and you're getting people excited, you're showing them how to engage with the Bible and their faith versus just telling them about the Bible and telling them about faith, there's a very big difference. If you're doing the right thing, people want more, or they should want more. It's kind of like we live in Netflix Nation. You end a season of episodes and you want just more, right? Yeah. You want to see more of the character or development, storyline, etc. Same thing here. Package it up, bundle it up, and offer it. So can you take the manuscript of the transcripts? Can you get an executive summary of the main points, the takeaways that you're trying to give in the sermon? Can you take a list of all the Bible verses in the actual sermon and the research that you did leading up to it that maybe didn't even make the sermon, all about the bibliography or articles or even books? Many times I know that pastors don't just read Bible commentaries to create a sermon. They'll read New York Times bestsellers and other great resources that have been around. Curate a list of resources so people can start to explore that topic further on their own. And it might be also something, as you bundle and offer it, something that your discipleship, your small groups, your life groups might take on and use it to bring life to itself in a different manner. But the first place is, don't just file it in Dropbox so it just disappears forever. Expose it, bundle it, and offer it so that you may strike a note on one of the topics, and then you'll learn that, hey, we need to revisit this topic in sermons, in small groups, in counseling, and all these other places. You're never going to know if it's never exposed. So bundle it, offer it up. That's the fourth thing I think you should do with your sermon stuff.
I have two examples I'm going to share with churches that are doing something similar to this. Yes. One of them, shout out to Cornerstone Church in Oklahoma, my buddy Colt out there. Their pastor preached a series last fall through the book of Revelation, through end times. And Jason and I can attest to the fact that for some reason, our world has a freakishly intense interest in the end times.
Yes.
It's just, I'm not sure why. So after they finished this series, which they promoted in their community and promoted in their church, and the series was all done, they built out a landing page on their website, separate from their Subsplash page, separate from their regular sermon distribution, but they built out a single page with all of the videos in the series on it, with a lead generator, a call to action, which was download a free graphic that the pastor had put together, which was a graphic that detailed the end times timeline. And then they actually ran a Facebook, Instagram ad campaign promoting the free download of the end times timeline. So people would go to the site, they could watch all the videos, they could binge watch them, because that's what people do today. It's funny, Kenny, you said earlier that we live in this Netflix world and we repurpose our sermon content in short snippets on social media because people consume it that way. But we also live in a world where people binge watch content, right? They don't want to have to wait for all the episodes to come out. They want to sit down and watch all 32 episodes of Yellowstone or whatever it is, at the same time. And so this gives them the opportunity to actually promote or market the content that they've already created and generate leads of people in their community who are raising their hand and saying, hey, I have an interest in this particular content. Jason's home church in the Phoenix area, Sun Valley, is about to do a very similar thing. They're going to do a sermon series, starts on Easter Sunday, on comparative religions. How does Christianity differ from atheism, from Islam, from Latter-day Saints? And so they're doing the exact same thing. They're going to build out a landing page on the website that has all of the different sermons on it. And their lead generator they're going to create is actually a PDF that shows what each of these faiths have in common and what their differences are. And then we'll run an ad campaign for that particular series in their geographic area, because they're confident that there are people in their community who are asking these questions. What is it that Christian people believe that's different than people who follow Islam believe? And so they're trying to scratch an itch that they believe is a real tangible itch in their community and provide something that's really useful. So those are a couple of examples that I have of that, bundling it and offering it. There's other things that you could do, discussion questions that go with the videos. And I love your idea of having a list of additional commentaries or books or resources that somebody can explore on those topics. But I thought that's pretty cool stuff that those guys are doing.
Yeah, and I love when you land on something like this and you got it built out, you can keep tweaking it as time goes on to make it even better. And once you have it, you never turn it off. Your leadership would find budget to continue running that campaign if it's producing results. I mean, why would you stop? I love the flow and the bundle and offer it thing. Churches, we just don't do that. Some churches are, but most churches are not, and they're not thinking this way. So I love this conversation. Okay. What's the fifth one then?
Show, don't tell, story, tell it. We need to start telling stories so that other people can retell it, share it, and more importantly, just understand it. You give them one chance to hear it on Sunday, and they might not have caught the vision of the message. So there's the traditional infographic. Create an infographic, just like Bart was talking about, like the end times thing that I think is great. Yeah. Those things live on. It's social friendly. You can make posters. You could put it into curriculum, into emails. There's so many different places. Infographics are great. Second one is sketch notes, right? You see this sketch notes happening in conferences and different places, even hiring somebody or challenging some artists in the community to do sketch noting while you do sermons live, which could be a really cool thing. Last one is just a simple explainer video. It might be the squiggly doodle type of things, or if you have an actual team or you have outside resources potentially, you can actually create animated motion graphic videos or even simple ones, but explainer videos are things that will extend the shelf life of your sermon also.
Yeah, love that.
And you don't have to be a big church with a big budget to do those things. Infographics, explainer videos. There's a platform called Fiverr that you can get people who are very creative and very talented to do those types of projects for you. Now, it's called Fiverr because, you can spend $5 and get something. Granted, if you spend $5, you'll probably get a $5 result. If you spend $50, you'll probably get a $50 result. If you spend $500, hopefully you'll get a $500 result. So I think the thing to caution there is that if you go to Fiverr expecting to get a $500 result with a $5 job, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But it is really easy to do, to find people online on platforms like Fiverr, where you can find freelancers who can put things like that together for you that you can then repurpose. And that, again, can be part of your overall bundle. But I love that. Story tell it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
These are easy steps, church, that you can take to take the sermons that have already been preached, and you might want to retitle it. Usually we create a title that we think is really clever, but people that are de-churched and are in church have no idea what you're talking about. So actually relabel it for a felt need title, and just take these steps that Kenny's talked about and just start implement it.
Yeah, from an SEO standpoint, this is something we talked about. We actually, in our recent conversation with Rich Birch, we talked about this, is that as creative people, we want our sermon titles and our sermon topics to be really creative. I preached a series, I use this as an example a lot. I preached a series years ago called Seeing Through the Fog. Any idea what that series was about? Well, you might be able to guess, narrow it down, but It was about what the Bible teaches about mental health issues, what the Bible teaches about anxiety, what the Bible teaches about grief, what the Bible teaches about depression. And I titled it Seeing Through the Fog because, well, when you're dealing with one of those issues, it's kind of like driving through the fog. You're not always sure where you're headed. It was very creative and it was very artistic. But if I put that sermon series on YouTube or I put that on my website and I simply called it Seeing Through the Fog, the search results that I'm going to get or people looking for the content that I preach is going to have nothing to do with what the content is actually all about. Because literally the sermons were, I retitled them when I posted them on YouTube, What the Bible Teaches About Anxiety, What the Bible Teaches About Depression, because that's really what the sermon series was all about. So I'm just going to quickly recap the 5 things that Kenny says you as a church leader should do with your sermon every single week. 1 is transcribe it. And he broke down all the different things that you can do with your transcription. 2, you can repurpose it. 3, yes. Email it. 4, bundle it and offer it. And then 5 is storytell it. And so we're going to include the outline here in the show notes for this podcast so that our audience can kind of follow along on there. Kenny, as we wrap things up, what parting shot do you have for our audience today?
It's just all this stuff seems overwhelming to a lot of people when they first hear about this multitude of options. And I would just encourage you to say, version 1 is better than version none. You want incremental gains so that you actually take one step at a time. You'll get there and to run the race, but you just need to take one step today. So I would just say, find one example, one idea from today's conversation and test it out and see how it goes. You don't need a strategic plan to map all of this out immediately. Incremental gains is what you're looking for. Version 1 is better than version none.
Jason, how about your parting shot? You want one?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I think, if you're a communication director and you're sitting there going, wow, this is a lot. How do I get your leaders involved? But don't just go, hey, I have an idea. Spell it out. This is what I want to do. And try to get the backing and the stamp of approval from them. I think that's going to help you go a long way and actually get more resources. I was just meeting with a church yesterday with the lead pastor, and I was explaining, this is kind of what we want to do with you. He was loving it. He's like, we're doing a little bit of this, but I love what you're talking about. I will find the resources for that. I'm like, cool. If you don't paint that picture for him, he would never really have gotten it. But once I explained, this is what we want to do, right? And not to this extent, Kenny, but I explained a version of this is what we want to do. He was all for it. So don't underestimate your leader, because I think every pastor who preaches would love to see their content continue to grow and reach more people. Hello. But you have to explain what you want to do with that. I think if you do that, you're going to find yourself in a good position. So that's my take.
Yeah, I would give one piece of caution on all of this, and that is consistency is key. Yeah. Don't bite off more than you can chew as you start, because then you won't continue. Yeah. So start small and let it build. Kenny quoted Gary V just a minute ago. Version 1's better than version none. I'll quote the great John Maxwell. Content compounds. Nobody knows that more than John Maxwell. Just keep writing books, and eventually you'll have like a whole library that you've written. You don't have to do everything all at once, but you do need to be consistent. Your content will compound over the time. I actually got a little chuckle earlier when Kenny said, I wrote this in a blog post, and for a second, I could tell you were trying to figure out where you'd actually written it, because I don't know how many places you write blog posts for. But it's like, Kenny is a prime example of content compounding. Agree with that? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Content's your friend.
Yeah. Content's your friend. If you Google his name, you'll find it comes up on a lot of different places, which is kind of hard sometimes to tell. What does this guy Kenny actually do? None of us are really quite sure. I'm not sure he's always sure. But Kenny, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today. We really appreciate it. You have been a friend of Missional Marketing and have been a super help for us, for so many of our partners, our church partners, and our friends.
Anytime. Love the spirit that you guys have and all the work that you're doing for the kingdom.